The evening air carried a hint of approaching autumn as Jack Matthews pushed open the weathered door of Murphy's Corner. The neighborhood bar was nearly empty, just as he preferred after another exhausting day. He nodded at Murphy, who already had his usual draft waiting, and settled onto his familiar stool. He barely noticed when she entered. Designer suit, elegant watch, not a hair out of place. She chose a seat 3 stools away, placed her phone face down, and ordered whiskey. 2 strangers sharing nothing but proximity and quiet jazz. Then, without warning, she turned toward him with unexpected intensity. "If you had one wish," she asked, "who would you use it for?" Jack Matthews had never planned on being a single father. At 40, his life had settled into a rhythm of work and responsibility that left little room for anything else. 8 years ago, he had been a mechanical engineer with a promising career, a beautiful wife named Sarah, and dreams of building a family together. Then Lily was born, tiny, perfect, and the center of their world. But 3 years later, Sarah's heart condition, which had always been manageable, suddenly wasn't. The doctors used words like unforeseen complications and acute cardiac event, but what they meant was she was gone, and Jack was alone with a 3-year-old who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. He'd sold their house to pay medical bills, moved to a modest 2-bedroom apartment, and eventually left his corporate job. The hours hadn't been compatible with raising a child alone. Instead, he opened Matthew's repair shop, where he could set his own schedule around Lily's needs. It wasn't glamorous, fixing industrial equipment and occasionally household appliances, but it paid the bills, mostly. His hands, once used for precision design work, now carried permanent traces of grease that no amount of scrubbing could remove. At home, he'd become both mother and father to Lily, now 8. He'd learned to braid hair through online tutorials, mastered the art of cutting sandwiches the right way, and could recite every character from her favorite books. They lived simply, but with a routine that provided stability. Every night, weather permitting, they would spend 10 minutes on their small balcony, looking at the stars. Jack had taught Lily to find the North Star, explaining that no matter how lost you feel, there are fixed points to guide you home. The life he'd built wasn't what he'd planned, but it was theirs, and he protected it fiercely. Dating seemed impossible, both logistically and emotionally. Sarah's absence remained a presence in their home, not as a ghost, but as a foundation. Jack hadn't had a conversation with an adult that wasn't about work or Lily's education in longer than he could remember. Until tonight. Elena Winters, at 35, had achieved what most would consider the pinnacle of success. As the founder and CEO of Horizon Tech, she'd built a company valued at over $300 million in just under a decade. Industry publications regularly featured her as one of the most influential women in technology. Her calendar was perpetually filled 6 months in advance with speaking engagements, board meetings, and investor pitches. The daughter of renowned academics, Elena had been raised with the clear understanding that achievement was the only acceptable currency. Her parents had provided every educational advantage while remaining emotionally distant. By 16, she'd been accepted to a prestigious university. By 24, she'd secured her first round of major funding for her startup. By 30, she'd been featured on the cover of Business Innovator magazine. What those glossy features didn't show was her empty penthouse apartment, with its spectacular view that she rarely had time to appreciate. They didn't capture the exhaustion that had become her constant companion, or the way her executive assistant now knew more about her dietary preferences than any friend or family member. 6 months ago, she'd ended her engagement to another tech executive when she'd overheard him discussing their relationship as a strategic partnership with beneficial synergies for both their companies. Elena had everything except someone who saw her as more than what she could provide: funding, connections, status, or innovation. She had people who needed her decisions, her signature, her presence at events, but no one who simply needed her. The weight of being Elena Winters had become almost unbearable, which is why she'd slipped away from her driver tonight, walked 6 blocks to an anonymous bar, and asked a stranger a question she'd never dared ask anyone in her actual life. "My daughter," Jack answered simply, "to give her everything I can." Elena's carefully composed expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Not for yourself?" "She is myself," Jack replied, surprised by his own candor with this woman he'd never met. And so began a conversation between two people who, by all outward measures, should have had nothing to say to each other. Yet as the night progressed, they found themselves speaking with an honesty typically reserved for old friends or strangers on trains. People you trust precisely because they have no connection to your real life. "My daughter's working on a science project about butterflies," Jack was saying, his face lighting up as he spoke about Lily. "She's convinced that if she creates the perfect habitat in our apartment, they'll stay with us through winter. I don't have the heart to tell her otherwise." Elena found herself smiling. A real smile, not the camera-ready version she'd perfected for press events. Let her discover it herself. Some lessons are better learned through experience. "You sound like you speak from experience," Jack observed. Elena traced the rim of her glass. "I built my first computer when I was 12. It crashed spectacularly. My father refused to help, said failure was more educational than success. He wasn't wrong, but a little guidance wouldn't have hurt." "Is he still around, your father?" "Technically. He's a visiting professor in Vienna this year. We exchange emails on birthdays." She shrugged as if this were perfectly normal. "What about your daughter's mother? Is she—" "She passed away 5 years ago. Heart problem we thought was under control." Jack's response was practiced, a statement of fact he'd learned to deliver without his voice breaking. "I'm sorry," Elena said, and meant it. They fell silent, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The bartender refilled their drinks without being asked. "Do you know anything about stars?" Jack asked eventually. "Theoretically. I funded an observatory at my alma mater last year. Haven't had time to visit it." Elena laughed softly. "It seems absurd when I say it out loud. I teach my daughter about constellations on our balcony. Simple telescope from a garage sale. Sometimes I think she's learning more from that than school." They talked for nearly 3 hours, moving from childhood memories to favorite books, from Jack's struggles with Lily's increasingly complex homework to Elena's frustration with board members who underestimated her technical expertise. Neither mentioned last names, job titles, or specific details that would identify their social positions. In that anonymous space, they were simply two people connecting across the invisible barriers that might otherwise have separated them. As midnight approached, Elena glanced at her watch reluctantly. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." When Murphy brought the check, Elena reached for it. Jack began to protest, but she shook her head. "Please, let me—" There was something in her tone that made it clear this wasn't about money, but about something else. Perhaps gratitude for a rare moment of normalcy. As she stood to leave, she looked at Jack directly. "You're the only person who made me feel visible tonight. Thank you for that." Before he could respond, she was gone, the door swinging closed behind her. Jack sat for a moment, strangely affected by the encounter but convinced it was a one-time intersection of their otherwise separate lives. He left a tip for Murphy and headed home, the conversation still echoing in his mind as he paid the babysitter and checked on his sleeping daughter. The following evening, Elena found herself doing something she couldn't quite explain. Her calendar showed 3 appointments she'd need to reschedule. Her executive assistant was sending increasingly concerned text messages. Yet instead of being in her office reviewing quarterly projections, she was changing in the back of her town car, swapping her tailored suit for jeans and a simple blouse, removing the statement jewelry that had become part of her professional armor. "I'll call when I need you, Thomas," she told her driver, ignoring his surprised expression. "Take the evening off." Murphy's Corner looked exactly the same as she approached it, unremarkable and authentic in a way the carefully designed spaces of her usual life were not. She pushed open the door, instinctively glancing toward the spot where Jack had sat the night before. It was empty. Elena chose the same stool she'd occupied previously and ordered the same whiskey. She waited, sipping her drink slowly, occasionally checking the door whenever it opened. The minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. The other patrons came and went, a couple celebrating an anniversary, a group of office workers unwinding after their shift, a woman about Elena's age who sat alone with a book. But no Jack. Murphy refilled her drink without comment, though Elena caught him studying her with quiet curiosity. "It doesn't come in every night," Murphy finally said, wiping the counter. usually just Tuesdays and Fridays after work. Elena felt a flush of embarrassment at being so transparent. "We just had an interesting conversation. I thought—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain something she didn't understand herself. Murphy nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Jack's a good man. Been coming here since his wife passed. Doesn't talk much to strangers, though. You must have made an impression." Elena's professional instinct for information activated. "Jack?" "Matthews. Runs Matthews Repair Shop over on Westfield. Fixes just about anything mechanical." Murphy supplied this without apparent concern for his regular's privacy. "Good with his hands. Rebuilt my refrigerator unit last summer when the supplier wanted to charge me double." Elena nodded, committing the details to memory. She finished her drink and reached for her purse, extracting a business card and a pen. After a moment's hesitation, she wrote on the back, "If you ever need more than an old repair shop, call me." She didn't sign it with her name, just her private number, the one only 5 people in the world had access to. "Could you give him this? If he comes in again." She passed the card to Murphy. "Sure thing, miss." Elena left a generous tip and walked out into the night, turning once to look back at the bar with its weathered sign and dim lighting. Something about this unremarkable place had offered her more peace than her penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and imported furnishings ever had. She couldn't explain the pull she felt toward a man who knew nothing about her world, but for the first time in years, she wasn't analyzing her own emotions for inefficiencies. She was simply feeling them. 6 days passed. Jack found the business card in his jacket pocket where Murphy had slipped it after his Friday night visit to the bar. He'd stared at it for a long time, running his thumb over the embossed lettering, Elena Winters, Chief Executive Officer, Horizon Tech. He'd looked up the company online and found himself staring at photos of the woman from the bar. Only now she was standing on stages, shaking hands with tech industry leaders, looking polished and untouchable. The articles described her as brilliant, uncompromising, and visionary. Jack had placed the card in his desk drawer and tried to forget about it. What could he possibly say to someone like her? Their worlds couldn't have been further apart. The brief connection they'd shared had clearly been an anomaly, a moment when 2 lonely people had temporarily stepped outside their real lives. He told himself it was better this way. On Thursday morning, Jack was called to the Meridian manufacturing plant to repair a critical piece of equipment. The facility produced components for several tech companies, and downtime cost thousands of dollars per hour. He was elbow deep in the machinery when he heard the distinct sound of high heels on concrete, accompanied by multiple footsteps and deferential voices. "We've increased output by 17% since implementing the new system, Miss Winters. The quality control metrics have improved significantly as well." Jack froze, then slowly extracted himself from the machine, wiping his hands on his work cloth. He turned to see a group of executives walking the production line, led by a plant manager who was gesturing enthusiastically. And there she was, Elena, dressed in a deep blue suit, nodding at appropriate intervals while asking pointed questions about efficiency and worker conditions. Their eyes met across the factory floor. For a split second, her professional mask slipped, revealing genuine surprise. She hesitated, then said something to her group before walking directly toward him. Jack became acutely aware of his worn work clothes and the grease stains on his hands. "Jack," she said simply when she reached him, as if his name held some significance she was still trying to understand. "Ms. Winters," he replied formally, conscious of the curious glances from both her entourage and the plant workers. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Elena," she corrected. Then, more quietly, "I came back. You weren't there." The directness of her statement caught him off guard. "Why would someone like you want to talk to someone like me?" The question escaped before he could reconsider it. Elena glanced back at her waiting group, then at the workers pretending not to eavesdrop. "Walk with me," she said, not quite a request, but not quite a command either. They moved toward a quieter corner of the facility, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. "I don't need anything from you," she said, when they were relatively alone. "Do you know how rare that is in my life? I just want someone who doesn't care who I am." "I know who you are now," Jack said, holding up grease-stained fingers. "And I'm very aware of who I am." "Are you?" Elena challenged. "Because I see someone who rebuilt his entire life around what matters most to him. Someone who talks about stars and butterflies with the same care he gives to machines." "That's who I was talking to at the bar." Jack's defenses wavered. "And who were you at the bar?" "Someone who could breathe for the first time in years," she answered simply. "Will you meet me there tonight?" Not by accident this time. The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither had anticipated. Jack thought about his scheduled repair jobs, about Lily's homework, about the many reasons it made no sense to say yes. 8 o'clock, he said instead. That evening, Jack arrived at Murphy's Corner precisely at 8, having arranged for his neighbor to watch Lily. He'd showered and changed into his one decent shirt, dark blue, long-sleeved, no visible wear at the collar. His hair was still damp, and he'd even trimmed his beard, feeling slightly ridiculous about the effort he'd put into his appearance. Elena was already there, seated at what he now thought of as her stool. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Without makeup and corporate attire, she looked younger, softer somehow. When she saw him, her smile was different from any he'd seen before. Neither the polite expression from the factory nor the guarded one from their first meeting, but something genuine and a little uncertain. "You came," she said, as he sat beside her. "So did you," he replied, noting that she'd placed her phone in her purse instead of on the counter. Murphy approached with knowing eyes. "The usual for both of you." They nodded in unison, then shared a surprised glance at having established usuals after just one evening. "I suppose proper introductions are in order," Jack said when Murphy moved away. Jack Matthews, owner of Matthews Repair Shop, father to an 8-year-old butterfly enthusiast named Lily. Elena Winters, CEO of Horizon Tech, collector of impressive titles and empty achievements. She extended her hand with mock formality. He took it, his calloused palm against her smoother one. "I wouldn't call a $300 million company an empty achievement." "Depends on what you measure success by," Elena replied. "Tell me about Lily's butterflies." And just like that, they fell back into conversation, as if no time had passed since their first meeting. Only now, there was an awareness between them of who they were beyond this bar, of the worlds they would return to when the night ended. Yet somehow, this knowledge didn't create distance, but instead added a new dimension to their connection. 3 weeks later, Elena's town car pulled up outside Matthew's repair shop just after closing time. She'd texted Jack earlier. "Can I see where you work? No ulterior motives, just curious." He'd agreed with characteristic brevity. "Doors open until 6. The shop was exactly as she'd imagined. Organized chaos of tools and parts, the scent of metal and oil, workspace showing years of dedicated use. Jack looked up from a disassembled motor as the bell above the door announced her arrival. "Sorry for the mess," he said, though he wasn't really. Elena shook her head, taking in the details with genuine interest. "It's perfect. Reminds me of my first workshop in college." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You had a workshop? Where did you think technology comes from? Clean rooms and computers?" She picked up a wrench, testing its weight with familiar ease. "I built prototypes with my own hands before I built a company." She moved around the shop, asking intelligent questions about his equipment, occasionally identifying tools or parts that surprised him. When she pointed out a more efficient way to arrange his inventory system, he found himself listening rather than bristling at the suggestion. "You're full of surprises, Elena Winters," he said as she examined a vintage motorcycle he was restoring for a client. "So are you," she replied, looking up with engine grease smudged on her cheek. Not many people would see past the CEO to the engineer underneath. Not many people would see past the repair guy to... He trailed off, unsure how to finish. "To the father, the astronomer, the man who rebuilds more than just machines," she supplied, her eyes holding his. "I see you, Jack." The simple statement held more weight than elaborate declarations might have. In that moment, standing amid the tools of his trade, they recognized something fundamental in each other, a capacity to look beyond surfaces to what existed beneath. After closing the shop, Jack surprised himself by asking, "Would you like to come to dinner?" At my place, Lily's been asking about the lady who knows about stars since I mentioned our conversations. The invitation hung between them, a significant threshold neither had crossed before. Elena hesitated only briefly. I'd like that very much. Jack's apartment was modest but welcoming. 2 bedrooms in an older building, furnished with a mixture of practical items and personal touches. Family photos lined one wall, alongside Lily's artwork, and a collection of books that revealed Jack's unexpected literary interests. Lily answered the door before Jack could reach it, bouncing with excitement at the prospect of a visitor. She was small for 8, with her father's brown eyes and a wild mane of curls she'd clearly inherited from her mother, based on the photos Elena had seen. Are you Daddy's friend who knows about stars? Lily demanded without preamble. I know a little, Elena replied, crouching to Lily's level despite her designer pants. But I hear you're the real expert. Lily beamed. I can show you my constellation map, and my butterflies. They're in chrysalises now, which means they're changing, even though we can't see it. Sounds like people sometimes, Elena remarked, glancing up at Jack with understanding. 2 months later, a local business publication ran a feature titled Horizon Tech's Rising Trajectory. The article focused primarily on the company's innovative approach to sustainable technology, but included a photograph that captured attention across several industries. Elena Winters, CEO, leaving a modest apartment building in the city's western district, smiling in a way rarely seen in her professional appearances. The caption read, Winters has recently been spotted outside her usual corporate environment, sparking speculation about her private life. By afternoon, several gossip sites had identified the building as the residence of Jack Matthews, a repair shop owner and single father. By evening, the story had evolved into tech CEO dating working-class repairmen, complete with amateur paparazzi photos of Elena and Jack at a neighborhood cafe with Lily. Elena's phone rang continuously the next day, her PR team desperately trying to formulate a response. Board members expressed concerns about company image in carefully worded emails. Social media erupted with commentary ranging from supportive to cynical, power couple redefining status expectations versus midlife crisis or publicity stunt. During a scheduled press conference about Horizon's quarterly results, a reporter asked directly, Ms. Winters, can you comment on your relationship with Jack Matthews and how it might affect investor confidence in your leadership? The room fell silent. Elena's PR director stepped forward, ready to deflect the inappropriate question, but Elena raised her hand slightly. My personal life is exactly that, personal, she stated, her voice calm but firm. However, I will say this. Horizon Tech was founded on the principle that innovation comes from unexpected places and perspectives. I carry that belief into every aspect of my life. Next question, please. Her professional response satisfied the business press, but did little to quell the personal speculation. That evening, Elena arrived at Jack's apartment to find him unusually quiet. I saw the news, he said, after Lily had gone to bed. Your board members can't be happy. They'll survive, Elena replied, trying to keep her tone light. It's hardly the first time a CEO's personal life has been discussed. But usually it's about dating another executive or marrying into a prominent family. Not, he gestured to the modest apartment around them. Not dating a repair shop owner, Elena finished, a edge entering her voice. Is that what's bothering you? That you think you're somehow beneath me? Aren't I? Jack challenged. In their eyes, in the world's eyes, you've worked your entire life to build something extraordinary. I fix machines and struggle to pay for my daughter's school supplies. And that makes you less. Elena stood now, frustrated. Jack, do you think I'd risk everything I've built for charity? For some misguided attempt to appear down to earth? Give me more credit than that. Then what am I to you, because I don't fit in your world? Elena's expression softened unexpectedly. Maybe I don't want to fit in my world anymore either. She sat beside him again, taking his hand. Jack, the board members, the press, the gossip, they don't know me. Not really. They know Elena Winters, CEO. You know just Elena. And Lily knows someone who explains constellations and checks on butterfly chrysalises. Those versions of me feel more authentic than the one I've spent years perfecting. 3 months into their relationship, Elena faced a business crisis, requiring her full attention. She returned to workaholic patterns, canceling plans with Jack and Lily. Jack sent her a simple lunch to her office during a difficult day with a note. "Remember to breathe. We'll be here when you're ready." Elena broke down in private. Torn between career responsibilities and new emotional connections, she had to learn to integrate personal happiness with professional identity. When Lily fell ill and needed to be picked up from school, Jack was stuck at a remote repair job. In desperation, he called Elena, who left an important meeting without hesitation to help. She took care of Lily with unexpected maternal instinct, and when Jack returned, he found them asleep on the couch with a storybook. He stood watching them for a long moment, something shifting permanently in his heart. In sleep, Elena had none of her CEO polish or careful composure. She was simply a woman who had dropped everything to care for his child. 6 months into their relationship, Horizon Tech hosted its annual gala, a prestigious event attended by industry leaders, investors, and technology innovators from around the world. Elena invited Jack as her guest, publicly acknowledging their relationship in her professional sphere. During the evening, Jack overheard younger executives making dismissive comments about him being Elena's charity case or community outreach project. Elena confronted them directly, defending not just Jack but their relationship. Jack has forgotten more about practical engineering than most of Silicon Valley ever knew. His insights have already saved Horizon over $2 million in manufacturing inefficiencies. But more importantly, he's the most authentic person in this room. 9 months after their first meeting, Elena invited Jack to consult on a new educational initiative called Foundations that would bring practical technical education to communities with limited resources. For the first time, Jack felt their separate worlds beginning to align in a way that preserved the integrity of both. 1 year after their first meeting, Jack, Elena, and Lily returned to Murphy's Corner for dinner. As they waited for dessert, Lily suddenly grew serious, studying Elena with unusual intensity. "I was thinking about Mom today," Lily said thoughtfully. "I still remember her from the pictures and your stories, and that's important." "Very important," Jack agreed, his voice slightly rough. "But I was thinking," Lily continued, her gaze moving to Elena, "if I could choose another person to be in our family, I'd choose you." Elena's carefully maintained composure faltered. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't hide. "Is that okay to say?" Lily asked uncertainly. "I don't want to make anyone sad." Elena reached across the table, taking Lily's small hand in hers. "That's more than okay to say. It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me." Jack watched them, his daughter and the woman who had unexpectedly become essential to both their lives. Feeling a sense of completion he'd thought permanently beyond his reach after Sarah's death. "You made us visible again," he said softly to Elena, echoing her words from their first meeting. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Jack and Elena stood on his small balcony looking at the stars. The night was clear, the city lights creating a glow on the horizon but leaving the sky above them relatively dark. "Do you remember your question?" he asked. "That first night?" "If you had one wish, who would you use it for?" Elena recited. "I was trying to understand what kind of man you were." "And what did my answer tell you?" "That you were someone worth knowing." She turned to face him. "I never asked what you would wish for now." Jack looked at her thoughtfully. "Nothing," he said finally. "For the first time in years, I don't have a wish, just gratitude." Elena smiled, understanding completely. They had both spent years focused on what was missing: comfort and security for Jack, genuine connection for Elena. Now they had found something neither had been looking for. Not a perfect fairy tale ending, but a beginning built on mutual healing and the simple miracle of being truly seen.